Podcasting with Ceri Jones.
Hi everyone, and welcome to this week's podcast, and a special one, as it's the 40th episode since its launch back in July. I want to thank all my listeners for the encouragement and messages and emails during that time and sharing the journey with me. Well, hopefully now we've turned the corner of lockdown, and as this week is Easter, I hope most of us will be going out this weekend and do what we've all missed and wanted to do over the last 12 months. To go fishing. So here's to a successful bank holiday with plenty of tight lines. This week's guest is editor on one of the UK's leading fly fishing magazines. He's grown up as a young boy in Rutland, but now lives north of the border in Scotland, just a 5-minute drive from the famous and legendary River Tay. He talks of his passion for float tubing, especially on Loch Tay, and tells us a story of a fish he was definitely not expecting to catch while doing a shoot for a feature. He also goes on to tell us of the stories of his fly fishing travels and of his bonefish hosted trips. Welcome to my chat with Mark Bowler.
Hi, Gary.
Hi Mark, I'm sitting here now. I've just come into the studio and it's cool in here, and I've got my cup of tea, but I was out the garden waiting just now, and it's like a proper summer's day out there now.
I'll tell you what, Ceri, if you listen hard, you can probably hear the rain falling on the windows.
Really?
It's And I think, like we said the other day, there was rain in the west. I think this is that rain that's now pushing through here, so yeah, the river's still pretty high, yeah.
It's almost sun lounger weather here at the moment.
I know, I heard it was like that down south yesterday.
And funny enough, it was the same this time last year, because we remember it was lockdown now, it just started.
Yep.
And everyone was in their gardens.
It was, wasn't it? It was very, very similar. It seems to be the pattern, doesn't it, these days, where you get really nice April, May, and then June starts to slide a bit, and then July can be really wet.
So, end of the month now is a relaxing time for you, because the other day you said you had wrapped up another issue. Is it at the end of the month you finish it?
Yeah, well, usually towards the end of the month, Ceri. It varies on the day, depending on where it falls. But yeah, usually towards the end of the month is the deadline, and then after the deadline, you can relax a bit. That's usually when I'll either start planning the next issue or I'll just go fishing, and I do that on the first week or the second week. During the first week or the second week, they're the best weeks. And then the pressure starts to build a bit after that again, and then we get going again. So this week, because it's been raining and the river's high, I'm just getting the next issue lined up.
Yeah.
And then next week, when the river's starting to fall, I might not be here so much.
Yeah.
I'll either go for salmon, because there was a big tide. There's very big tides at the moment. So salmon often come in on those big tides. It might be good for salmon, but also trout season. We should be starting to see a few large dark olives and March browns now. So I'll be on the lookout for that.
Do you find that because your work is fishing, and then, like you just said then, the first chance you get now, you're going to actually go fishing. Don't you actually, do you get stale of it and you want to do something else? Do you get like a fishing overdose?
No, I never do. I never have done, Ceri. I think that a lot of what I do is sitting in front of a computer or on the phone, like not like I'm talking to you, but usually I'm either on the phone or in an office, and I find that when I go fishing, I just love it. I just want to get out there, and when I'm there, I'm totally absorbed in what I'm doing, and it gets me. I don't think about anything else at all. It's funny actually. My dad was quite academic. You know, he was a teacher trainer, but he was very high up in that. And I always remember he had a Japanese guy came over, and they were talking, and he said, "Oh, this is my son Mark. He's a big fisherman." And I know he said to me, he'd got this Japanese chap over, and he said, Mark, he said, what do you think about when you're fishing? And I know I really disappointed him, because I said, well, I'm generally thinking about why I'm not catching anything. And that's what you do, isn't it? You're constantly, you're focused so much on it that you don't think about anything. I think what he wanted me to say was, I philosophize about life, and I think about, the meaning of life and everything. And you don't have time for that. You're constantly working away at what's going on and what you need to do, and just little nuances of the cast and what's the fly doing, and you've got to concentrate so hard. And I just get totally absorbed in it.
Yeah.
And so I find that relaxation away from the office, that's enough for me. I can do that for hours on end. And that's the other thing I've noticed, that if you talk to a person who's not a fisherman, they say, how do you go fishing for 4 hours? And I say, well, to be honest, 4 hours when you go fishing, it's actually not a very long time.
No.
What you want is that extra few hours just so you can work everything out. And, and I said 4 hours goes like that when you're fishing. It goes very, very quickly.
It's great for the mind, isn't it? If you got anything on your mind, worrying or whatever, it's the best place to be, beside a river on a lake. Because, like you said, your mind is totally into fishing.
It is. It's totally focused on it, and you just can't allow anything else in there because it'll ruin your day. I mean, but it can't get it in anyway because you're excluding it. You've got too much to think about.
Yeah.
And that's how I see it. And I like you say, I never think, oh God, I've got to go fishing today. Never ever thought that.
It's the perfect stress-free place, unless you lose a big fish, and then your head is cooked in.
Yeah, that can get you. But then even when that happens, you know that big fish is there, and can you go back and get another chance?
You mentioned your father. Did he actually fish?
No, he didn't, Ceri, but he was incredibly patient, and I think that's I'm patient, and he was with us. My brother and I, we liked fishing. And so he would go with us, and he would sit with us. I think he just liked being with us. And but he would spend hours and hours taking weed off our hooks and untangling stuff.
Yeah.
But he never really fished. But he did go. He did like going with us. He just liked being around us, I suppose. And then, of course, I remember him rescuing me once when I fell in. We were fishing up near Loch Marie. The sea lochs there.
Yeah.
And I fell in, and I remember him rescuing me. So it was a good job he was around there. That was actually in the tidal race in the sea loch. So because my hat fell off. I always have a fishing hat, and my hat fell off, and I went down to get it and slipped it.
My father used to take me as a kid. I started when I was 12, and there was a local lake, Llinfawr. Actually, I fished it yesterday, fun enough. And did
you?
Yeah, and he used to take me because I obviously couldn't drive at that age, obviously. So, but he wouldn't fish. He'd thoroughly enjoy take me up the lake and leave me there, and then he'd stay there, and he loved to wash his car and polish the car and clean it. It was the cleanest car going. But he just liked to be out there, and having sandwiches, and we used to do it all the time.
Well, so he would clean his car whilst you were fishing?
Yeah. Instead of, like a lot of people do, like I do, I like cars, out in the back lane or in the yards and at home. Yeah. He used to just spend his time then, on the car. take a bucket of water from the lake, and I'd be fishing. I used to love it.
You should see my car. My car isn't clean.
Wow.
Mine's a total mess. It's usually got some fishing gear lying in the back somewhere.
Yeah.
And I generally drive it with my waders on, so it's got all sand in the bottom. Because I can nip down to the river, and I find that sometimes, I was talking about how a lot of the times when I fish, I'm maybe just going down for the evening, so I'm just I'm not got long. I've probably got 3 hours, but like I was saying, that's not long.
No.
So you generally put your waders on and just get in the car and go. So there's all sand all over the bottom, and then there's just loads of old nylon in the back, and there'll be hook packets and stuff.
No.
My car's not the cleanest and it's not the tidiest, I have to say. It's a real, and it's got flies all stuck in the top above the driver's the driver's seat. There's all sorts of flies stuck in the top in that upholstery there.
Does it smell of fish though?
Yeah, it does. It does, because there's usually an old net in the back as well.
I know.
So, and there's always stuff like, when you fish for salmon and trout, you've always got various bits of gear that you don't want to take out in case you get.
Yeah.
So if you're going salmon fishing and you see a big hatch of marsh browns start, then you want your trout gear in there as well.
Yeah.
So you end up taking loads of gear and maybe just leaving that in there just in case of emergencies.
Yeah.
If an emergency hatches and stuff. So yeah, my car is not the cleanest, I have to say. Your dad, he wouldn't think much of it.
No. Well, luckily I've got a fishing wagon, you can say, really. But I do like to keep it clean. But every few weeks, I look at it and think, geez, I got to sort this out. And it's at that stage at the moment. And I've only been fishing the last 2 weeks, but it's starting to look dodgy.
Yeah.
But I do like the smell of fish. I got this weird, I don't know what it is, like a fetish probably, right? Because I used to work in Cardiff in the city centre. And I had a parking space in the Old Arms Park, the Millennium Stadium. And to walk to work, I had to walk across the city centre to the other side. And there's a market, an indoor market, and there's a fish market stall there called Ashton's. It's quite well known, actually. And I used to take a detour when I used to walk to work around into the market just to walk past and smell the fish. And very often when you go away, like for a week, 2 weeks fishing in the car, and you come back home and the smell of the car.
Oh, yeah.
And it's nice because it smells of where you've just come from. And you don't really want to clean it then because you wish you were still there.
I was thinking about that, fish market. It's interesting going to a fish market, isn't it? And just looking at all the fish. But I always wonder, if people just go and buy fish from a fish market, that they've never actually seen the fish in its best light, because a dead fish doesn't look like a live one, does it?
No.
The colour and the vibrancy and the life the iridescence of a live fish, you only a fisherman knows what that looks like.
Yeah.
When a lot of people they know fish, but they probably have never seen a fish in its pure natural state. And I think that I was thinking it's probably one of the reasons why we go fishing is just to lift that fish out of the water, which nobody else can see, and just see what it actually looks like in the natural world. They're beautiful things.
Oh, absolutely.
But as soon as they're there, they lose it all, don't they?
Yeah. And do you know what? I parked up. I better not say the name of the supermarket, but they got these big banners outside of different offers and that. But there was this huge banner, and it said, "Quality wild Scottish salmon," right? And it showed a photograph, right, of somebody like the guy behind the counter holding this fish. It didn't have a fin to start with, right? and it was pale.
Yep.
And I thought, you really need to have some researchers to show, what a real salmon looks like. It was a cringingly poor, and I thought, really? Any fisherman walked past would have just laughed.
They would have done. I think that's the thing. I think, I've got quite strong views about, the salmon farming and the way it's affected our wild fish. But I think that is one of the things is that the fish farmers seem to have hijacked our fish, our wild fish, and they're saying, look, this is the same fish as the wild Atlantic salmon.
Yeah.
But when you look at it, it isn't. It's flabby. It's soft. It's got a dull colour to it.
Yeah.
And if you look at a wild Atlantic salmon, if you catch one, you can see pinks, lilacs in the fins. You can see blacks in there. You can see blues. It's such a beautiful fish. The silver in a fresh springer is just unbelievable.
Yeah.
And the fins are absolutely razor sharp. And the flesh, honestly, some of the springers I catch on the Tay, you could punch them and you would hurt your fist. They're so solid. They're like tuna. They're like tuna. They're so well fed and they're in such prime condition. And when I always look at those posters of farm salmon, and I think, God, that is nowhere near the same fish.
No. So you live by the Tay?
Yeah, I live right on the Tay. Yeah. So I can salmon fish it, or I can trout fish it. So, and the trout fishing on the Tay is quite good. It's a big river, but it has some decent hatches. If you catch it right, if you catch it wrong, it's really, really hard. But if you catch it right, and there's some nice fish in it too, three quarters of a pound, but there are some bigger fish in there as well. And there's a nice grayling in the Tay as well.
Is there?
Big grayling.
It's not known for it, is it?
Yeah, to be honest, that it isn't like I fish for grayling in Wales, and if you can get into the grayling there, you can keep picking them out. Say like on a bend or something like that, or run into a pool on a bend, and once you get one, you think, I bet there's some more there. But on the Tay, they seem to be more individual or in pairs, but they are big. But you might get one or two. But to get a whole bunch of them, in my experience anyway, it's actually not that regular. So they seem to be more. I don't think the populations they're not as common, and so you've got to find them. First of all, you've got to find them, and then when you do find them, you've got to see if there might be another one there, rather than I found them now. I should be able to start picking up a few now.
Yeah.
It's not the same. Not in my experience, anyway.
How long have you lived up in the what's the name of the place you live?
Well, I live on the Upper Tay. So that's when I first came up. I lived at a place called Kenmore, which is right on the where Loch Tay actually runs out. It's the start of the River Tay. So I lived on overlooking Loch Tay, and I would fish on the river or on the loch.
Yeah.
So, and that river then runs for maybe 50 odd miles all the way down to the sea. But Loch Tay itself is another 17 miles long. And then you've got rivers coming into there at the far west end, which extend way, way back all the way across the width of Scotland, virtually.
Yeah.
So, like I say, like we were saying, it was raining here now, and it's been raining over the west. If it's raining in the west, the Tay will actually come up, and it might not be raining here, but the Tay will actually push up because of all the rain just trickling down from the western catchment. It's a massive river.
What's the loch like then to fish?
Well, yeah, Loch's great. I like fishing it. It's very difficult to access because it's quite steep sided. It's got a road either side of it, but the road doesn't go very close, and it's got quite steep sided most of the time. So
you've got and finding a parking space is like a real art, and so you've got to know your parking spot, get in the parking spot, jump out, and then you've got a bit of a trek down. So what I used to do is I used to take my float tube, and I've got a backpack float tube, so I could basically sling it on my back, and I'd get my rod ready, and I'd get my flippers and stuff, and then I'd march down, and you've got to walk your way through, usually through a bit of forestry, or usually through really high bracken.
Right.
And you almost got to climb down to get into the loch. Once you're in it, it's really good. There's some nice fish in Loch Tay. I've noticed that when I first came here, there was a lot more fish in it, and they were a bit smaller. But now they're a little bit bigger, but there are less of them. I'm not sure if that's either the quality of the water or cormorants, because I think I've seen a lot more cormorants on Loch Tay than I used to. Loch Tay can be good, and I've caught some nice trout on Loch Tay, and then I caught one. I wrote about it the other week actually. I was out with David Perfumo. We were doing a feature for.
Right.
He wanted to do a feature on float tubing. He knew I went float tubing, so he said, "Will you take me out float tubing, Mark?" And I said, "Yeah." Well, I said, "But we'll go on Loch Tay." So I got a boat, and we put the tubes in a boat, and we motored all the way up to the central part of it. We had a photographer there, Glenn Satterley, and we got out of the boat, and I said, "This is a good place." And we started fishing. Well, Glenn had never ever seen float tubing, so even when we were putting the waders on and the flippers, he was running around taking pictures because he'd never seen a fisherman in flippers or with a float tube.
Yeah.
And when you look, you have to walk backwards and launch yourself backwards. Well, he was in his element. He was firing off shots all the time, and he was loving it. And so we launched, and we then started fishing, and he took some pictures of us fishing. And where we were, there's Ben Lawes, which was one of the highest mountains in Scotland, was right behind us.
Yeah.
And so I thought, it would be very photogenic. And really, that's why I said, let's go there. And then David started fishing, and we got a load of shots, and Glenn was on the bank. And David said to Glenn, we'd only been there about an hour. And he said, have you got enough shots then, Glenn? Shall we go? And I said, well, we can't go yet. We have to fish.
Yeah.
So I said to David, I said, look, just go up by that point on those rocks. There's usually a fish hanging around those, those points that you get where the jumble of rocks comes in. There's usually trout hanging around there.
Any feature,
Yeah, there usually is, isn't there? So he went up there, and I said to Glenn, if you get some shots of David there, you'll get the mountain in the background and David fishing. And as he was doing it, I noticed some little fish dimpling in this bay, where Glenn was. So I said to Glenn, I said, look, there's some little fish dimpling here, Glenn. I'll flip out, and if you set your camera up, I reckon I'll be able to cast towards the camera, and hopefully I'll get one. And then there'll be a splash in front of the camera, and I'll be in the background
with the mountain
behind me. Yeah. So I said, so I got flipped out, and he set his camera up on the tripod, and I said, I cast out towards him, and he said, are you ready? I said, yeah. He said, are you ready? Yeah. I started retrieving. I just made about 2 or 3 retrieves, and this almighty gleam just rolled over the wet flights,
Wow.
And I thought, what on earth's that? And I lifted into it. And I remember David said, have you got one, bowler? I said, yeah, I have. And he said, make it jump for the camera. And I said, David, you haven't seen this fish. I said, it is so big, it won't get off the ground.
Really?
It was, I tell you, there's a fish farm on the loch, and it grew rainbows, and sometimes they'd escape.
Oh.
But this one must have escaped a long time ago because we eventually got it in. It was £19 1 ounce.
You're kidding.
And it was a massive rainbow, absolutely massive rainbow, and it was so funny. I thought this will get off in a minute, it's got to, but it didn't. And I caught it on a size 12 Pearly and Victor. I caught it on,
wow.
and it was just the whole thing was incredible. And Glenn had taken so many pictures, he'd run out of film.
Oh, no.
You had to put some print film in the camera so you could get some shots of it. Because he was so excited about the flow tubes. But I have got pictures of it. But
in a 19-pound rainbow on a floor tube on a loch.
Yeah, when I hooked it, it started off. So the loch there is about half a mile wide. It's 70 miles long, but it's about half a mile wide. So when it actually ran, the first run, it turned the flow tube around and it started taking me out towards the middle. And I was only fishing 5-weight, and I thought I better stop this a bit. So in the end, what I did was I flipped in and got out of the tube, and I landed. I beached it because we didn't have a net that was big enough either.
I was going to say,
but
you probably have a little scoop net.
Yeah, I know. But, those scoop nets are nice, but when you get something big, they're in trouble. It was so big, it was funny, because it was just bonkers.
Yeah.
And the fact that Glenn was there with his camera, and I was expecting to catch a fish probably about 6 or 7 inches.
Yeah. And was that picture used then in the feature?
Well, the problem is that this was a long time ago, and we used to get a lot of problems with people coming onto the loch. Especially when rainbows escape, you'd get all sorts of people turning up, and the whole banks would be lined with them. So I didn't really write about it for a while because our club's involved in the ticketing, and what used to happen was we used to get endless problems if there were lots and lots of anglers causing. You'd get people camping overnight, barbecues, and we would get all the feedback from it, and it was never good feedback. And so I tended not to. I didn't really write about it. So I wrote about it the other month, just because it's a great story. But
that's an awesome. I thought you were going to say, it's going to be about £3. We said 19. I thought, how the hell are you going to land that on a tube?
And it was. I think it had been in there a long, long time, Ceri, because the fins on it were really good.
Wow.
And it was a big, firm fleshed fish, really, really hard fleshed fish. It was not soft. Pretty sure it hadn't just come out. I'm pretty sure. I know it had. And it was miles away from the fish farm.
I've done a little bit of YouTubing. I've done a little bit of floor tubing over the years, and I find it's quite hard work, isn't it? It's not a leisurely thing. You got to keep your legs going if you're drifting, otherwise you're going to spin around. Or the floor tube I had. Yeah,
I think when you're on a big loch like that, the good thing about it is that a loch like Loch Tay fishes all the way on the edge. You don't want to be more than 20 yards out, really, because it drops away so steeply that the best fishing is in the margin. And the good thing about a tube is that you can get out and fish the margin without standing in the margin, if you see what I mean. So you would generally hold yourself and you would just keep flipping. The best thing was if you got a westerly wind blowing along the loch, you'd flip out, stay about 20, 25 yards out, and just keep casting right onto the rocks in the margin and pulling your flies off. That's what I did with Glenn. I mean, that cast I made, I bet that fish took maybe 10 or 12 feet out from the bank. But a lot of the fish are in that marginal area. So in a tube, you can just keep putting your flies in that marginal area and pulling them off.
Yeah.
And if you've got a westerly wind, it'll just keep pushing you maybe in and onto the bank, but down the bank. So what I used to do was I'd get the tube and I'd work my way down a bank with the wind. And so I just keep going.
Yeah.
And the trouble with a tube is if you want to change location, then either you've got to come in, get out, take your flippers off and walk, or you've got to use your flippers to get to that new part of the lake you want to fish.
Yeah.
And sometimes that can mean flipping 400 yards, that is a lot of effort.
Yeah.
But with boards, when you've got a whole expanse of bank sort of which you can work, you can just keep going down it. And what I used to do was I would just keep going and fishing down, maybe come in, have something to eat, drink, then get back in again and just keep working that bank and just keep blowing down with the wind.
Yeah.
Many times when I used to get out and it was dark, and I'd then put my float tube on my back and I had to get back out and up to the road.
Yeah.
And then walk along the road to find the car. So that was always the difficult bit because there's very little access. So you'd have to fight your way back up the bank to get to the road. I remember one. the bracken must be it's like a jungle, it'd be 8 feet high. You couldn't see anything.
Yeah.
You'd have to know. You just know that if you went uphill, you was the road, and if you went downhill, it was the lake, the loch. And I remember once I nearly went down a very steep gorge, which I didn't know was there. I thought, that was close. And then I stepped in about 10 yards and nearly fell down a badger set as well.
Wow. That wouldn't have been no fun, would it?
Well, it wouldn't, because I think if I'd gone down the gorge or if I'd gone down the badger set, bust me ankle, nobody would have ever found me, Ceri. I mean, nothing there. I mean, they might have found me in the winter maybe when the bracken died back, but that is, I'm sure nothing else. Nobody goes there. It's pretty wild.
Yeah, I done a feature a few years ago now on Talyllyn. Have you been to Talyllyn?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, and it was run at the time, but it was a guy, Tommy Rowlands, and they had the Tinnacornell Hotel right beside it. It's probably one of the most picturesque, idyllic spots in Wales. And I did a feature with him. We had a couple of hours on the boat, and we had some lovely fish. And we went in for lunch then in the hotel, and he said, we'll go I got a float tube. He said, we'll do some pictures in the afternoon on the float tube. So he said, yeah, that'd be good. And anyway, when I was walking alongside this bank right outside the hotel, I could see these browns, and they were semi-wild. They'd be put in a while back, but the people, the residents, and the people visiting the hotels were feeding them in the lake like ducks. They were, and these browns, 4, 5, 6 pound. And he said, yeah, they're always there. I said, right, photo opportunity, yeah. So he got in his float tube, and he went out the lake, and he drifted over just the front of the hotel. And he had one about 4 pound. And the photographs, they did look stunning. I got down low, and behind him, he had the valley and the road coming down, and it was beautiful. But it was lucky that these fish, obviously the shoot was for actually Welsh water. Like, people didn't know that they was almost semi-tame, but it's not for me, float tubing. I've done it, and I probably would do it again, but it takes you to places where you can't fish, like the local lake here with me. Basically, it's almost a triangle shape. On the one bank now, somebody cleverly, they thought at the time, planted willows on one side. Well, it's like, no, you just can't fish it. All this one bank is willows overgrown. So there's a lot of fish that just stay over that side and they'll never get caught. So I think if you can grab hold of and get permission, actually, to fish it with a tube would be well worth it then.
I think that is one of the things about tubing, Kerry, is that when you are tubing, because of this backpack tube I've got, I take it up into the hill locks quite a bit.
Yeah.
And sometimes when you fish in those hill locks, I mean, they're hardly fished ever in any case. But in a tube, if you're out in a tube and either fishing a bank which is inaccessible, like you're saying, or you're out over some water where you can't reach from the bank, often you're fishing it thinking, do you know what? I don't think anybody has ever fished here before.
Yeah.
And fishermen like to be in places where nobody else goes. And I think one of the things about tubing is it can get you to places where you think, I don't think anybody's ever fished here before.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
I think there's a monster fish where nobody else has been.
Yeah.
So that's one of the things about tubing. It can get you to those places where nobody else seems to be able to get to.
But going back to the magazine then, your work, have you actually been editor from the start?
Yeah. We started it. So when I went to work for Salmon Trout and Sea Trout magazine, which was based in Peterborough. So Salmon Trout Sea Trout magazine had been going a year and a half or something, and they were looking for an assistant editor. And I'd just seen the advert, and I had no idea really that they were based in Peterborough. And I come from Rutland, you see, so I saw the advert. It was just in a local free paper, and I saw it, and I knew the magazine, and I read it, and I really liked it. And I thought, that's the magazine I really like. I didn't realise it was in Peterborough, and they were looking for an assistant editor, and I applied, and I didn't get it straight away. I got it, and because I'd always wanted to write, and so I thought, well, this would be great. So I started there, and when they took me on, they said they wanted to start this magazine, which would be based around. At the time, it was going to be more still water fishing and fly tying, and I did both. So I was there for about a year and a bit, just sort of learning the ropes and everything. And then we launched Flyfishing Flytying, and I edited it. And then that was the start of the journey, really. And we ended up here because it was sold after about 3 years. It was sold, and it moved to Scotland, to Aberfeldy, where my office is now.
Right.
But then it got sold. It went through a turbulent 3 years when it was sold and bought maybe 3 times. But meanwhile, I'd actually started living in Kenmore, and so I kept editing it. But it was owned by a group from Milton Keynes bought it, and I thought, well, I want to carry on editing it, but I do not want to live in Milton Keynes, having just got up here.
Yeah.
I'd rather stay up here. And they, at the time, modems were just coming in, and I said, no, that's fine. You can do everything up there and just modem everything through, and you might have to come down to clear the pages every month, but if you can put up with that, then by all means. So I started working from home, and then going down every month to sign off the pages, and then that was sold again, and then it was sold again, and it was very unsettling, because every time the phone went, you thought, oh God, what's happened now? It was very, very unsettling with so many people moving in and buying it, and then having ideas, and then them selling it. And I tried to buy it, and I got outbid on it by a guy from down in Kent. And I got some really good advice from a guy who was he'd written a bit for me, and he was he trained as a lawyer, but he was a vicar. It was Robert Spate. I don't know if you've ever come across him.
No.
But he talked to me and said, he said, Mark, he said, go and work for the guy in Kent, but say to him, look, if he wants to sell it, then you've got first refusal on buying it. And he said that, you just need to put that in the contract, and then if he sells it, then he's got to come to you first. And so I did that. And when I went down there, and he said, will you come and work for me? And I said, well, I will, but what happens when you sell it? I want first refusal on it. And he said, well, I'm not going to sell it. I said, well, that's great, because we can put that in the contract then. And then, and I think what happens is with a fishing magazine, I think people look at it and they think, we could make a lot of money out of this. And really, it's difficult. It's not easy to make money on fishing magazines.
It's pressure each month, isn't it, really?
And it is, yeah. I mean, I'll tell you, it's quite interesting because, fishing is very, very popular. It is one of the most popular sports in Britain. But he also, by that time, he had built up a little stable of car magazines, Ceri.
Oh, yeah.
And I could tell within a few months, those car magazines were making him probably as much money in a month as he'd probably make from the Flyfishing Flytying in a year,
Yeah.
And they got the priority all the time. They were always first in the queue for everything. And after 6 months, he was a really good guy. His name was Dennis Taylor from Unity Media. He was a good guy, and he said, after 6 months, he said, Mark, are you still interested in buying it? And I said, of course I am, Dennis. And he said, because it's my lifestyle. It has to be a lifestyle. It's not, it's business and it's a lifestyle. And he said, well, and he sold it to me for less than I bid against him for it. He was a really good guy. But it's funny because when you buy a magazine, you don't actually buy anything.
I was going to ask, what do you actually buy? Because if you finish the issue tomorrow, there'll be nothing to buy.
That's absolutely right. So I bought the title off him, and I came away from Kent with a cardboard box full of a few slides.
I thought you were going to sleep in it.
Well, I that was the worry, I thought I might have to.
Yeah.
I did take it on. I remember the first issue I did on my own. I lay in bed and I thought, what happens if I don't sell a single copy? Because you print thousands. It costs, print bills are really, really expensive.
Yeah. So
it costs you thousands to print it. And you lie in bed thinking, what if I don't sell one copy? And it's a bit of fun. But it worked out all right. But it was nice to be able to build the magazine with a plan because you knew every time it got taken over that there would be a different plan, and I often think we've been through this, it won't work. So yeah, it was a good result in the end. It was difficult for a number of years.
Lockdown hasn't affected it at all, is it?
No, I think lockdown. Obviously, it was once we realised what was going to happen. I never really thought about closing it. I could have closed the title, I suppose, for a year or so and put everybody on furlough. But I think that lockdown actually made you think, well, I know people really look forward to the magazine, and I thought this will keep people going more than anything else. And there was a lot of information around at the time that people needed to know about, and especially with, fishing not being one of those activities you could do at the start of the first lockdown. Fishing wasn't counted as being one of those activities, and of course cycling was. And I thought, well, how can you get, you can't get any more socially isolated sport than fishing.
Exactly, yeah.
But I think the Angling Trust did a really good job on it, and they obviously got that message across the government, and but relaying all of that information to anglers became a very important part of the magazine, and I found it. I felt really good about doing the magazine, and it was difficult because obviously the advertisers, a lot of the people who were advertising or producing stuff or marketing stuff, they weren't open. So you kind of took it on the chin a bit, and we would print copies, and they would go out, and they wouldn't go into the stores because the stores would be shut.
Oh, yeah.
So you were overprinting, and then you'd obviously cut that back because you realised the stores wouldn't be open, and then the store would gradually open, and so you'd have to start feeding them back in again. And we do quite a lot of overseas copies as well, and the overseas copies, they weren't even going out of the country because, like New Zealand and Australia weren't accepting copies because their stores were shut. So we had them held in a warehouse. They were stacking up in a warehouse. It was a nightmare, really. And after a few months, you actually thought, I wonder if I'm doing the right thing here. But I got loads of letters and emails from people saying, really look forward to seeing the issue drop through the letterbox, because people were at home and they couldn't even go fishing. They couldn't do anything. And so the magazine appeared was really good to see for them, and that kind of inspires you, and you think, well, really appreciating it, and it was great. I really enjoyed it, and to be honest, Ceri, especially as I couldn't go fishing, I think I would have gone nuts. And I really felt for people who were on furlough and couldn't do anything else. I thought, God, what would I do? I'd tie a lot of flies.
There's only so many flies you can tie, isn't it?
There is, but it's quite a lot. It's quite a big number. But I think I generally...
Sorry, it's an escape for some, isn't it? I mean, like, there's no hiding the fact a lot of people have really struggled during this lockdown. The fishing is a great escape. And what I learned, I suppose the timing was just lucky, is that I started the podcast in July. And I've done every week. This is the number 40, actually, no? And since then...
Is it? That's great.
Yeah. And it's grown every week. And I put them on a Friday, and then all weekend then my phone is just going all the time, listen to this podcast, and it's reminded me of so-and-so we used to fish there, and I get so many saying, thank you for putting the podcast on, that has kept me going, in the difficult times. And that then is thinking, Jesus, you've taken it to another level, really. You're touching people where they're expecting something to look forward to. So you created something which means something to somebody, which is a big thing, isn't it?
And that's right. You'll get the same sort of buzz that I do when you know that thing, or your podcast goes into their homes, or your poppy drops on their doormat. It is. I know our readers, and I know your listeners. They'll really appreciate that, and they'll look forward to it.
Yeah.
And in these times, there isn't a lot to look forward to. You can only watch. You can only binge watch so many of those series on TV. I mean, I've done a bit of that, and I'm getting to the point where I'm thinking, no, I can't do any more of these.
Yeah.
I think it is a buzz doing it, and it's nice to be appreciated, and I think fishermen do appreciate that sort of thing.
Absolutely.
It gets them.
Well, hopefully,
gets them out fishing when they're actually fishing.
Hopefully we've come through the other side now. And yesterday, for the first time, we had some glorious weather here, as I said. And there was fish rising.
Yeah.
And to be out casting at rising fish now, again, is what we've always wanted to go back to, and you appreciate it a lot more.
You do, don't you?
Yeah. But going back to what you mentioned about overseas sales, you sailed a mag overseas. You've done a lot of trips abroad yourself, yeah?
Yeah, I have. Mainly in the Northern Hemisphere. I've never been Southern Hemisphere, I haven't. And that's mainly because when you do a magazine every month, it's very difficult. I think if you go Southern Hemisphere, I mean, I'd love to go to New Zealand, Ceri, or Tasmania, but
yeah.
I think in order to do that, you've got to go for a minimum of 3 weeks. Well, that only leaves me a week to do the magazine, and because I can tell you, if I went to New Zealand for 3 weeks, I wouldn't do. I mean, I could go with the intention of producing the magazine whilst I was out there.
I was thinking
I knew that wouldn't happen. The first overseas trip I ever did was one to the Bahamas, and I remember lugging a laptop, one of the early laptops, with me. It must have weighed about 20 pounds. And I remember lugging it in the bottom of my case all the way to the Bahamas, thinking, there's no way I can just fish when I'm over there. I'm going to have to do some work. Do you know what? It sat under my bed all the time I was over there until I got back home. I never touched it. Because when I go on a trip like that, I just want to fish it. I don't want to work. And so I think if you went Southern Hemisphere, New Zealand, you'd got to go for 3 weeks.
Yeah.
And I just haven't been able to do that. But
I've never been to Southern Hemisphere. I've been up north.
Haven't you?
No, I've been to Iceland, Sweden, Finland, and a few of those, which I know you've been to. You fished the Morum, he was telling me as well, haven't you?
Yes, I was telling you about the Morum, the place where the big salmon there run in the Baltic. They feed on there's a lot of herring in the Baltic, and they feed on the herring. And they grow really, really big. I saw some of the biggest salmon there I've ever seen. And I told you about when I arrived, the Germans who were just going home after their week's fishing, and I was waiting to talk to the manager, and they said, "Oh, can we have our fish, please?" And they went to the freezer at the back, and it was like body bags coming out of the freezer. They were huge. They were wrapped in black polythene bin liners, but they were being pumped on the counter. And they must have been, I couldn't see the fish, but they must have been 25 pound plus every single one of them. Wow. And there were half a dozen of them was thumped onto the counter, and I thought, crikey, what kind of a place is this? And so I fished the Morum. The Morum is a very public river. It's you don't get a lot of privacy on the Morum, and you have to get into your pool quick. Before I made the mistake of resting a pool, because I saw somebody go through it, and I thought, there's nobody around. I'm going to give this a few minutes before I get in it, just to give it time to settle, and maybe fish move and whatever.
Oh yeah.
And I just laid down on the bank in the grass, and lo and behold, 2 Germans appeared from outside, from the trees on the opposite bank, and jumped in. I can't believe it. So I never did. I didn't make that mistake again.
They didn't have their deck chairs beside the lake, but did.
I tell you what, it was very much lighter. Couldn't believe it. They came out of these trees. I thought, I looked around, I hadn't seen anybody. And then they suddenly appeared out of these trees, and we were in the pool, and I thought, I'll have to be quicker. And then I went to another pool, and I did hook a big sea trout, and I got that in right underneath. There were some trees around there, and there's some fast water. You know how in fast water, and when you've got a 15-foot rod, it is difficult to land fish when the trees are right behind you and pushing in on you. And I got it, so I could easily see it, and it just slipped off the hook just as I was about to land it. So, but it was a beautiful fish. I reckon it was about 7 pounds, really still fresh run with those big black penny spots on it,
Gorgeous.
And I went when I got back to the manager's office. He said, "How did you get on?" And I said, "Well, I didn't get a stand." I said, "But I lost probably one of the biggest sea trout I've ever hooked." And he said, "Oh, really?" He said, "How big was it?" And I said, "Well, it was about 7 pounds." I said, "About 3.5 kilos." And he said, "Oh, Mark," he said, "the average is 4 kilos." so he was a bit disappointed that I caught a fish that was 1.5 pounds under average. I tell you, there's some big fish in that. Big fish in that river.
I'd love to go there. I've been many times to Sweden, but it's mainly for the grayling and the trout and the people there. And you know what I always remember: as soon as you fly in, that's all you can see are trees and water. You know, it's like it's a special place, and the people are really friendly. I found as well. But going about the Germans and the deck chairs, then I remember it took me back to I used to go opening day. To Chew and Blagden over the years, and then you'd get there early, and then you'd park up maybe 6 o'clock or something, you know, when there's no light and it's dark. And as soon as a hint of light comes up, you're looking up in the lake, and you see a row of these wading nets. People have come there before. This is my spot, and they just wait in, you know. And I thought, jeez, I don't know if they do that now.
Well, what I'm hearing, I was hearing about Buell that's just opened. It opened on Monday, and it sounds like it was back to those old days, because I used to do that at Ibrook Cay. So Ibrook was just down the hill from me where I live.
Yeah.
And so I remember going down there for sun opening days, where the queue, if you drove, you ended up in a queue. And I don't know if you've ever been to Ibrook, but there's a road that you go through Caldecott, and then there's a road that runs all the way through the fields to the lodge at Ibrook. I remember that road being full of cars queuing to get into the fishery.
Yeah.
And it took ages to sign in. And the whole of especially if the wind was blowing hard on one side of the reservoir would be completely full of bank anglers every 20 yards. And it was, I remember going there one opening day. I couldn't find anywhere to get in. I was driving up and down thinking, where will I get in? And I eventually found a spot, but there was somebody every 20 yards. It was amazing. And it was always like that.
Yeah. I saw a photograph the other day on one of the Facebook pages, actually. Somebody put a picture up from the late 70s. And it was on Graffham Wall. And I don't know how many, you lost count, how many anglers all along the wall, you know. And I can imagine if you just turned up, wanted a fish, you just couldn't fit in.
You know, the last few years, you could go to Rutland or Ibrook fishing from the bank. I like fishing from the bank.
Yeah.
And you've got the choice, you know, you can go wherever you like. It's very rare to come across many bank fishermen.
Yeah.
But I think that sounds like it might have changed a bit.
I fished a Troutmaster final in Pittsford many years ago. And when you fished half the day on the boat and half the day in the bank. And I got drawn this guy in the morning, lovely guy, Peter Mendham. And he used to play football. He's a footballer, he was, from Norwich City at the time. And I had a great morning session with him, and we had 1 or 2 fish. And in the afternoon then, you just come off the boat and you just find your own space in the bank and fish. And you know what? It was packed, and I couldn't find anywhere to fit in the afternoon. And there was just one bit of bank, and I looked over and I thought, I could squeeze in there. So I just walked up, and there was this guy standing. I could have comfortably fished it, but, you know, I thought I'd ask this guy first, do you mind if I just come here? And he says, yeah, no room, mate, he said. I thought, right. And there was enough space, but I thought I should have asked, you know, anyway. And luckily for me, the guy I fished in the morning, Peter Mendham, was about 4 people up. And he'd seen this, and he calls me over. Come and fish next to me by here, he said. So then, it was brilliant. I stood next to him then, and I caught 11 rainbows in about 2 hours, right? And
Yeah.
And every time I was netting a fish, this guy who said no room, he didn't have any fish. And he was looking up, and I had the biggest smile going on my face, So it worked out for me good in the end. Like,
I bet he was inching down towards you all the time, wasn't he?
yeah, I was waiting for him to say, "Do you mind if I move in?" Yeah, like, and I could have said, "No room, mate." Well, I hope the next couple of months I'll be up your way anyway to do some fishing.
Yeah.
I'll give you a bell.
Are you doing some ferox, are you?
I'd like to give it a go. Yeah, if you know where they live, I'll come up and we'll have a day for them.
I'll tell you what, Ceri. There's ferox on Loch Tay,
Is there?
Yeah, definitely.
Well,
there's a lot of char in Loch Tay, and Loch Rannoch is just over the way as well. And I know there's some big ferox in Rannoch. I'd be surprised. I don't think many people fish for ferox on Loch Tay, but I think there's quite a lot of char on Loch Tay. I do know there's char on Rannoch as well.
no, in my luck, I'd be fishing Loch Tay for the ferox and I'll have a 19-pound rainbow.
I tell you what, you wouldn't be too disappointed though.
No, I wouldn't. You're right. If they're the same as in the west of Ireland, I know how they feed and where they like to feed and what times and the methods. So it's just of reproducing those and finding what water's up there and what they feed on, basically. I think quality bait is the number one key.
Right.
And like, for instance,
do you fish with a downrigger, Ceri? Do you fish with a downrigger?
No.
Now, how do you do it?
Well, the thing
how do you get down there?
They're not deep, right? That's the thing.
Right.
No, they live deep. When I started going over there, you speak to the locals and they're great storytellers. They're out off Inchigail, 100 foot of water, and you're there drinking a pint, listening to this, you think, Jesus, they're out there, But you soon realise they're going to be eating where the bait are, and the bait aren't 100 foot down.
Yeah.
So I started learning myself. I was going out 6, 7 o'clock in the morning, right up till about 11 o'clock at night, living on the lake, on the boat for weeks on end. And then you get to realise what they do. They live deep. They're like loners. They're like us. They like to have your own space. But they like to eat down where the shoals of roach are. And the roach are in the shallow water. Well, say shallow, 20 foot, 30 foot perhaps. And so instead of travelling far for them, you get the very deep water, and then there's areas then where there's a drop-off. Maybe to the left of the boat, there could be 80 foot of water, 100 foot even. And to the right of the boat, it could be 20 foot. There's big drop-offs.
Right.
These are the places they live. So all you've got to do is come up to the drop, take a roach, and go back down. And I don't use any downriggers. I just got 2 basic spinning rods. Lots of people have said, I got all the gear going, fish finders. I don't. Years ago, I used to use a fish finder, not to find where the fish are, because it'll just drive you mad. Every few yards on the screen, you see fish.
I agree with that. Fish finders drive you bonkers.
Yeah. The only thing I used it for was a terrain. Because what you need, and I don't use them now, I know what's underneath. And you go with the wind, and because there's these drop-offs and ridges and channels in the lake, obviously you want a certain wind for a certain area. So when I wake up in the morning, I look up and think, right, the wind is southwesterly. I know areas where the wind will be ideal to drift, well, not drift, to row or to troll around those drop-offs, And there's a lot to it, honest. I fly fish for years, and people, there's a lot of people who think, trolling, anyone can do it. Honest, when I go out, it takes me 3 days to get in the zone, because it's a mental thing. You don't fish 10 hours without getting bored. So once you've gone to about 2 or 3 days, I'm so comfortable, I'm there, I'm part of the lake then, and you fish tidy, and it's, a lot of people try it, they think, it's not for me, and they give up. I have screamed at the rods and talked to the rods, and my biggest fish, anything, I've had lots sort of up to low teens on sort of any conditions, but anything from like £16 up, without no hesitation at all, they all come in a big wave. And when I mean big wave, I mean like waves which people wouldn't go out on. They'd all come
Really?
in. Yeah. And
that's interesting, isn't it?
yeah. I mean like serious big waves where the locals won't go out sometimes. And that's the difference. Because after I've had a few up to the record, but after I'd done that, I took my foot off the pedal and just went out occasionally. And that's the thing. When you live there, you don't go and fish as hard as when you go somewhere on holidays. You know, when you're there for a week,
don't, do you?
You fish every day. You fish rain, hail, wind, snow.
Yeah, you do. You're right.
You know, and I think that's the key. And that's what I've learned. Big wind. And I've said it, I've done a podcast on a 19-pound trout I had, one of the ones. And there's something, when you're on the lake 24/7, like weeks on end, you do become in tune with it. And what I found, there's I'm sure you've experienced it, right? Where you could be drifting on a boat, fly fishing even, trolling, whatever, and then there's a certain light in the sky, and the water, it goes like a mercury colour almost, and it is a definite sixth sense. And then you're switched on, right, it's going to happen. And I've done it when I'm fly fishing, and then it'll happen maybe for 5 minutes, and the fish are up, splash, 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 and then it's gone. And it's the same with the ferrets. Yep. When you get that light, it's almost like angels singing, you know, wake up, now is the time. And then that rod goes.
I tell you what, Kerry, I've noticed that when I'm sea trout fishing at night.
Yeah.
And I love sea trout fishing at night as well. And there are times I think changes in light bring fish on.
Yeah.
It's amazing. And sometimes you might get a fish on and think, blimey, look, the light, it's just dawn now, you know, or it's just got really dark, or it's just the moon has come out and it's just got really light. Last year I was fishing and suddenly started to rain.
Yeah.
And a fish took.
Yeah.
That change in light, and even though it's minuscule at night,
I bet.
you feel something and you think it's got darker, and then bang. There is definitely a thing about light and trout in particular, I think. I suppose that's the same with salmon as well. But it is. I'm absolutely sure that light is a very important factor.
Yeah.
Isn't that amazing?
On 3 occasions when I've been out on the Corrib trolling, there's another guy which goes, Paul Garrity, and he's well into it as well. And he could be, he could be 4 mile away, 2 mile away, whatever, on the lake, and we keep in touch, you know, with his phone, because it breaks the boredom as well, like, you know, and then, but 3 times this specific thing has happened. I could be trolling, bang, I'm into a fish. I bring it in. My mobile phone goes then. He rings me. I've just had a fish. And I said, I've done it as well. Could be 2 miles away. And it could be in that space of, say, 10 days, we've had, say, 2 or 3 fish, and they've come at the same time.
That is amazing, isn't it?
Yeah. We've got a lot to learn, don't we?
They are incredible things. They really are. We know so little about them, don't we, really?
Yeah.
That's what gets me. We try and put that all together, all these theories. We get little bits of it, little pieces of the jigsaw.
Well, we've chatted now for over an hour, and there's loads more questions I'd love to ask you. Something else which I know you do, which possibly you didn't do last year, you host fishing trips, yeah?
Yeah.
Where is it you normally do these trips?
Normally now, I've been taking people. Usually, the hosted trips I do are into somewhere in the Caribbean. So, what we've been doing is we've been to Mexico, Honduras, Cuba, Bahamas, and now we generally go into the Bahamas because we've set up a. I don't know if you know Dave Grove. who is
Know the name.
He fishes for England, and he lives down in Devon. Really good angler.
Yeah.
And between us, we used to talk about trips we'd taken with people abroad, and it's quite interesting. Often when you go, you realise that it's very similar. I think people who fish in UK on reservoirs, particularly, to go fishing for flat species like bonefish, tarpon, permit, barracuda. You've got the skills because of the casting skills and the fishing skills are very, very similar. But there are lots of nuances and tips to it when you get out there. And Dave and I always said it would be good to run a school where you taught people exactly what they were trying to do, what the tides were doing, what the guides were trying to do, what the fish were, how the fish differed, and how the gear, how the setup and the flies differed. And what we found was that when we took groups just out there cold, if you like, that they would miss out on a lot of the best fishing because they weren't prepared for it. So we're now running these schools out on a place where I've been many, many times, and it's a really good place with good boats, good guides, good fishing. And so we use that as a school, and we do it in conjunction with the Bahamian government. So it's a little bit cheaper than you would be able to do normally. And they obviously want people to encourage people to go out there. So we do these schools out in the Bahamas now, and that's mainly what I'm doing at the moment is these bonefish schools that we call, and they're really good fun. I mean, they're a good laugh. I mean, everybody's there on holiday, which is great, and hopefully we can get them get them right into what they're fishing for and what they're supposed to be doing. And if they were ever then want to go and organise their own fishing or go on another organised trip, then they're much better prepared for that. Because it's quite interesting to see when people just go on the trips, something happens and you think, oh no, why were you only fishing 10-pound nylon, And you think, of course, you don't realise that you learn that as you go, and that's what we're trying to do is get across a lot more of the actual techniques and the way you fish. So when you actually get to these destinations, you can fish them much more efficiently.
Is there a season as such the best time to fish for bonefish then?
Well, I'll tell you what, Ceri. I'll tell you what. It's really extraordinary, like, because if you ever talk to anybody about international fishing, I can almost guarantee that the best month to be there is always going to be May. It's extraordinary.
Yeah.
It doesn't matter where you are. I imagine it's a little bit different in New Zealand, but it's extraordinary how many places there are in the world where somebody will say to you, yeah, but come in May, it's really good in May. And that's exactly the same. It's exactly the same with bone fishing in the Caribbean. May is good. But to be honest, the best season really is you can fish in November. You don't want to be really fishing. Once you get into that area of, say, July, June is starting to get too hot, and then July, August, September is very hot. And so, they're really hot months, and you can get hurricanes coming through there as well, and the weather's pretty unsettled. And flats get too hot then. So as you come around into November can be good because the water's still warm. Then they tend to get cooler around about December, January. You can still go then. And if you get decent weather, you'll still get decent fishing into February. But then that period, March through to late May, that can be that's really the prime time. Yeah. But you'll find that I found that there are destinations over there in the Caribbean where the Americans tend to say they will fish there April, May, and that is their season. They'll go there in April, May. But in fact, you could go in December, you could go in January, and the fishing is still good. It's just that it's a little bit warmer and it's a little bit more settled weather, and there's a few more fish about. But really, yeah, the Americans tend to put quite a narrow season on it, whereas I think if you're British, you could go anytime November through to May is usually pretty good.
Well, I think if I ever decide to go, it'll have to be November or December, because there's only one place in the whole world I want to be in May, and that's on a drifting boat on the Corrib.
Yeah, no, I know. That's the problem. It's, why would you not want to be here in May?
Yeah. There's a whole episode, actually, we could do on this bone fishing. You obviously have got it sussed. Well,
I love it. I love it.
I've got one more question to ask, and I've probably got a good idea now what it could be, listening to your passion talking there now. Where would you want to be to make your last cast?
I don't know exactly where I'd be, Ceri, but I know what I'd be doing, and that would be I'd get somebody to drop me off on my own on an expansive bonefish flat. Just hop off the back of the boat, and I'd drop into water, which is coming up to my shin, and I'd just start walking, looking for bonefish, because bonefishing is very much a sort of combination of hunting and then fishing. So you can't really fish for bonefish until you've actually seen them first. And seeing bonefish is a real art, and it's a skill. And you've got to concentrate so hard on finding those fish and seeing the fish before you can even start fishing for them. So I find that I would do that. I would get off the back of the boat and I'd just start wading, and I'd just keep going, looking for any sort of shadow, shape, stick, depression, bit of foam. You just investigate everything with your eyes, and you're looking for this fish, which is, you wouldn't believe how invisible they can appear at some stage. But if you've got a bit of sun in that shallow water, they'll always throw a shadow, and you're looking for the shadow that they throw. And it's quite amazing when you're looking and you're not seeing them. Everything you look at could be a fish. You think, is that a fish? No, it's not. It's a stick. Is that a fish? No, it's not. It's a shadow. Is that a fish? No, it's a bit of mud. Is that a fish? No, it's a stone. And then you keep looking, and then when you actually see one, you know instantly it's a fish because it's moving. They always move. And it moves, and you go, there's a fish. And then you suddenly locked onto it, and you've got to lock your eyes onto it because you can't don't let it turn because you'll lose it again. And so you then lock onto it, and then you think, right, how am I going to catch it? Am I going to have to move? Where's my cast going to go? And you have to think about where the sun is as well. So you don't want the shadow from your line. They'll spook on the shadow. They're really, really spooky fish. So as soon as you start moving, or you make a splash with the line or the shadow, or they see the glint of the rod in the sun, they're gone. And so that's what I would be doing. I would be wading and wading and wading, Ceri, until I dropped into the water and just floated off.
Listen to you talking then with a passion. I was there, standing next to you. I could see the fish.
And what I didn't say, Ceri, was, and the water's nice and warm as well. It's like paddling in a bath.
Well, thanks very much for chatting, Mark. I've thoroughly enjoyed it.
No problems, Ceri. I'll
speak to you soon, Mark.
That's brilliant.
Many thanks.
All right, okay.
Take care.
No problem. And you. See ya.
If this is your first time tuning in, make sure you catch all future episodes by clicking subscribe via the links on my website, castingwithkerryjones.com, or via iTunes or your favourite podcatcher. If you like what you've heard on this episode, feel free to drop me a line via my website. Tell me what you've enjoyed, ask a question, or better yet, Tell me what you want to hear more of in the future. And if you're looking for additional tips, tackle reviews or venue information, or just want to see what's been hitting the back of my net lately, search up Casting with Ceri Jones on Facebook or follow me on Instagram. And if you still want more, I'm regularly uploading video content onto the Casting with Ceri Jones YouTube channel, so just check that out and subscribe over there too. Wherever you follow, subscribe, comment or message, I look forward to catching up soon for a good fishing chat. Well, I think that's all for now, so until next time, tight lines and don't strike too soon.